also become increasingly important in discussions on climate change. Very few are aware of this because we talk the uh, CO2, but in fact it is a surprise that it is the soil that is really the largest source of carbon, where most carbon is stored. It is a very important element. We might continue, but I will simply now indicate which links I found to the geology, because I assume that most of the participants present here mainly focus on geology. The soil is absolutely dependent on the geological underground, and depending on this subsoil, the soil is generated. So there is a clear genetic dependency here. Sometimes the soil is transported from elsewhere, but generally the soil is created on a subsoil which nourishes that. So in some aspects the soil develops very fast, but in the long-term perspective it simply develops on the long-term geological scale, so it is a very long-term affair. It also keeps a time record. It leaves a time record which helps us deduce how the development was, for example, how the paleoclimate developed on a specific site. And when we consider it from today's perspective on the globe, we can say that the soil can be compared to our skin, which is a very thin layer of our planet. It creates something like an interface between the geosphere, biosphere, and atmosphere. So it is a place where all of these major domains meet, where many processes take place, which also have a interact with each other. Therefore, it is no surprise that when you just consider the predominant topics of today's policies, so we can state that with the exception of some topics which I'm going to ignore right now, like for example security or for example geopolicy, we can state that the soil is still understood as a dominant component of discussions about almost all topics and priorities of all governments, even at the global level. First, because of the farming, so that we provide for enough food for the people and animals, and so that we can produce enough materials. So this is the longest known importance of the soil. It has really a major, significant impact on the climate change, because it can mitigate uh, uh, the uh, the greenhouse gases. And the soil is also a major source of biodiversity. We all know that something lives in the soil, but to what degree is it well known that the species diversity in the soil is really enormous? It is fully comparable with the most diverse systems that we know on our Earth. It can easily be compared with a coral reef, or for example, with a rainforest. So the quantity of species in the soil is absolutely comparable, even higher than elsewhere. I think that in Central Europe, there is no place having more species on the soil than in the soil. So, for example, when you take a look at a forest, or mixed forest, where you have coniferous and where you have mixed trees, then you have more species on underground in the soil. So, for example, when you take a look at the articulates, in the species, then we will know about just a couple of percent, like for example 15%, and the rest of species, the remaining species, are still unknown. This is this is how I present the soil. It is a very nice comparison. It is the universe which I use for the illustration of what the soil is. This is in fact an image of the soil. When you take a look at the structure, it looks very similar, even though these are bacteria in the soil. The organisms here are also very manifold. They can do different things. And when we just move one level higher, and then we can see some soil organisms which we can see with our own eyes when we have, for example, a magnifying glass, but you don't see them in the soil just outside. They have approximately half a millimeter or a max of 1 millimeter. I'm a specialist in these beautiful animals in the mite. In the mites, it has to do with the flow of carbon, and then there are some animals of prey which regulate the existence of mites. It may be a surprise to you that the soil is not only a terrestrial place, because it also contains a lot of water, like for example water films, and it is also the habitat of many water species. So this is just an illustration of many of them. And so what you can see here on the left is simply a turtle tardigrada. It is an animal which can really travel in the cosmic space, and it can really be exposed to dozens of our radiation levels, and it can, for example, also live at in temperatures close to zero, and then when it has the best habitat, it can proliferate again. This why am I using it? Why am I talking about it? I'm talking about this because we often talk about the ability to move life to other planets. So what is all taking place in the soil? One of the major processes is really important for the dynamism of carbon on our planet. And that is simply the return of carbon and or mineral nutrients back into the process, back into the uh, flow, into the cycle. Because, for example, the the plants can just create organic stuff from the nutrients, but they use the solar power or the solar energy, and the decomposition takes place. So the organic stuff is decomposed, and if there were no decomposition, in fact, all nutrients would be converted in biological waste, and we would not survive anymore. But luckily, there are many organisms in the body, like for example old organisms, or for example excrements, or for example old woods, which help us support the decomposition, so that the minerals and nutrients can again return into the cycle. This is a very simplified process illustrating what's going on in a solid soil if it's still in a healthy condition. That organic matter or mass, like for example the roots or for example the leaves, are processed and decomposed by the soil organisms. The nutrients are then returned into the cycle, and CO2 is again then emitted. But the humus substances are most fundamental, because a specific part is no longer decomposed into minerals. It is not recycled, and it is really stored here in the soil in the long run. And there is a various turnaround here. But what's important is that a part of it stays really for a long time in the soil. From your perspective, we can really observe the fossilization of carbon, and it is presented this way really very rarely. It is often said that we use this organic matter, for example, for mobilizing the energy, because often we say that biomass can be burnt, but if we burn all of the biomass, we would have no humus, and that would be really bad, because the soil is really the largest storage of carbon. That is why we need this process to take place, so that the carbon is really accumulated in the soil. And what's really important is, beside the fact that nutrients are recycled here, is the generation of the soil structure. The soil structure is really the utmost importance. The humankind can produce almost anything. We can produce, for example, an artificial heart. We can create artificial intelligence, but humankind cannot create the soil structure. It is simply a product of soil organisms. And if we disturb this, then we can't replace this with any factory, regardless of the cost. Why is the soil structure that important? This is an image from a microscope showing the soil structure, minerals in various layers. So, for example, threats, various organisms, which create really a very complex environment in which millions of organisms live. And they fulfill this fundamental function. When we take a look at these multi-layered minerals in the soil, they have a chemical structure, and they can keep the cations, which means that they can keep the minerals in a specific amount for the plants, so that they are not eroded. But the quantity which can stay in the soil is relatively limited. Which we add the dead organic mass, then the molecules of these organic substances are really very complicated. It has a complicated structure, and there are many bonds here which can bind both anions and cations, and their capacity is really dramatically higher. So if we add up the original mineral capacity, it means that many more nutrients can be maintained in the cations, which the plants then receive from this organic mass. What's important is that if we do not have it in the soil, if we lose the structure, then it is quite clear that once there is more water, like for example a higher level of precipitation, it is eroded by water, and this usually happens on the large scale massive farming. So instead of organic matter, the farmers started adding the mineral nutrients, which is in fact the artificial stuff, and no organic mass is created here. It means that the nutrients are more volatile, and they can more easily get lost. And the mechanism of the soil is simply to keep, and the system to keep the nutrients is then failing.
No, Ivan.
So we can actually start with the manure or artificial fertilizers, but you know how much does it actually cost to produce fertilizers in the actual period as well? So this is the nature itself. When you give it the fuels it needs, and that is what we need to pay for. Maybe here we actually earn a bit more, but we also lose much more. So the most important thing is to make sure that the soil works and functions further. So the soil composition and the soil profile. In a good soil composition and profile, you can actually maintain and capture much more than anything else which has been created artificially. Here the yellow color is the organic matter and degraded matter on the right hand side. So if you put the same amount of water into these two, that is what happens. In the bed structure, the water flows away much faster, actually, and much less is kept and captured. So that's how the soil erosion happens. And here on the left-hand side, you see that the water has stayed there, has been captured there, and can be used by the soil and the organic matter. So that is also very important, and now very fast. And that is also very important, obviously, for the soil biodiversity, because if you have not enough organic matter, which is actually the basis of the composition processes, then if you have just the half of the volume as an input, then the big part actually of this whole ecological pyramid does not work. So it is not just 50%, it is actually much more. This is also one of the reasons, which is probably not that interesting for you as a geologist, but for us as biologists is very important. We actually are witnessing like the normal usual species disappearing from our nature and environment, and that is because of the food basis of this pyramid, which means that the volume becomes much smaller, so that you don't get enough food for the higher layers of the pyramid. So that's why we are actually losing absolutely normal, usual traditional species. And this is just simply because of the fact that the lower part of the pyramid becomes smaller. So this is the development of the landscape, of our landscape and nature as the time passes. And that is something that you can see horizontally also in many other places of the planet. So here we have the original vegetation virtually everywhere on the surface. And with the time we get to the picture on the right-hand side. That, of course, has to do also with the role of the human beings. And we have actually transferred the systems, the original system, the forests, to agricultural soil. And we are actually capable of using much higher volume of the product for our nutrition. But look at the biomass. Here you can see what is actually happening above and below. We know that in the forest there's a high production of biomass, but above it's a bit different. If we have wheat or other plants planted, it's something that we actually want to eat or that we want to feed our animal with, it's something different. The plants, they actually do not need to create root systems if they get enough nutrients from above. Yeah, so that's why the root systems are not developed enough, because they are receiving everything from above. So they use the roots just in order to keep stable and not in order to look for the nutrients. And that is obviously a problem for us, because if you look at how we actually use this matter that is being formed in the past, we were actually using only the grains. And now we are actually trying to use it also for the production of energy. So we're also using the other part of the biomass matter. And this is what is being left, actually. So now we are at 5 to 10%. It is obviously just an approximate number. Just only very little of this organic mass and matter gets back to the soil. And that obviously has got very severe consequences. So this is actually what's happening. We have these human substances being accumulated, and it actually contributes to the creation of the soil structure. So we get to this system. We get to the system where we don't get enough that organic matter to the soil, the bacteria and other soil organisms and fungi. They don't want to die, obviously, and they can do one thing, which is absolutely impressive. they can actually switch the enzymes and they start decomposing this long-term storage of organic matter in the soil, this humus, in order to get the energy in order to survive. So they start decomposing it. They start decomposing this fossil carbon, which has been stored there for tens, thousands of years, and they start actually letting it go into the atmosphere. So that's why we actually get more of this matter in the atmosphere, and it actually reverses. So this volume of CO2 which goes out from the soil is higher than the volume of CO2 which gets into the soil. And this is a basic problem. If we want to make sure that in this geocycle we want to reduce actually the volume of greenhouse gases, if we don't do it like really in generally with this process, the effect won't be seen anyway, because the soil will actually saturate everything what we had managed to capture and store. So this is like one of the main messages that I actually wanted to transfer and give it to you. So this, I think, has already been enough as information. Here you have a map with a specific index, and this is actually the percentage of organic matter which had been part of the subsoil and which is being used by us as humankind. The brown color, as you see, is mostly the territory where we live, and we have the total percentage of production of organic matter. And look at China, India, Europe, the eastern part of the United States. And then we have yellow and red color. Yellow color means 50%. That means that in all of these areas, we get more than 50% of this produced biomass, which actually has captured more than 50% of energy. We use it up. That means that the other organisms don't get anything from that. This is just like, a comparison. And in such a system, it is actually the same as if you had a car. And if the car hasn't got enough fuel, then it obviously doesn't get you where you want it to get you. So this is the same thing. And it has to do with our activities. Here you can see in the circle the areas with the most intensive use of soil. Yeah, sometimes you see you have both. So you have extensive arable land, moderately intensive, and intensive arable land. We have soil with more than 4% of organic carbon. And in these places, nowadays, we actually usually don't get more than 2%. And this is mostly because of the last 100 years of intensive industrial agricultural activities on the soil. Here you have a table which shows you that 30 to 50% of the reduction is actually related to the activities of human mankind. So the development, as we can see it also in the landscape, can be actually transferred also to the table above. So we have the original traditional system, and everything is in the first green block. So everybody is actually sharing the material. Then we started with the agriculture in B. So we actually reduced a little bit of the production, and the humankind has started taking up more for itself. But it was still a pretty extensive agricultural means of work. C, this is more or less, fertilizers, green revolution, new technology. So we actually managed to increase the yield of the agriculture, but we can also see the percentage of the production that we actually take up, and it's almost half of it. And what is the most fundamental? The green color is what has actually been less for the rest of the organisms on the planet. The red color is what we actually take up. And how it's going to end up or develop in the future, we can actually imagine it ourselves. Maybe we might be able to increase it a little bit for some time, but at some point, it will come to an end. So here's the explanation. So the soil regime can have actually three different phases. The first, the traditional on the top, the accumulation regime. It is a sustainable regime. The carbon is being accumulated, the soil structure is being formed, the composition of the soil is perfect. Then we get to the spiral of this exploitation system. We're somewhere in the middle. This is a deficit of the ecosystem services, and that's what we have to pay for by using fertilizers, by giving all the nutrients into the soil ourselves. And what should be our objective? We should get here above. And I would say that where we find ourselves nowadays is very, very low below it. And what is actually the relation of geoparks to this topic? Very easy, very simple. The geological environment is a space where a functional soil can be created and where the soil processes can actually develop in a traditional, normal, natural way. But we talk about not only biodiversity and soil diversity, we are talking also about topography and geological diversity, thanks to which we actually get a very high number of habitats that, thanks to God, can't be used for the intensive agricultural use. So it can be left actually to the mother nature. And that's why the majority of geoparks, and I actually looked at the majority of the geoparks, there where we have a higher relief, where we have a higher diversity and geological relief, we actually get also a much higher number and much higher diversity of organisms that live there. So that's why the geological environment is actually a precondition in order to make sure that we get also a high biodiversity in the animal world. Apart from that, in this environment, we actually get a very special and rare species. In many geoparks, there are the strict rules which are very close and similar to the original conditions under which the life has actually been developing. So we have also a smaller fluctuation of conditions, also subsoil sediments, there you have an environment that actually has not changed for millions of years, and there you actually have organisms still living which look exactly the same as the fossil species that we know. Me myself, I've seen several species. We have some soil mites species, and if you compare the oldest fossils of mites and nowadays actually mites, they actually look the same. If you want to talk about the living fossil, just think of Latimeria, because you can see, the fossils all around us. There are dozens and hundreds of them actually living around us, but we don't know it. And I'm just giving it or saying it just an impulse, because one of the objectives of Geopark, apart from the investigation and science, is also the education, and I'm absolutely convinced that many of the things that I have mentioned are actually preconditioned by the geological subsoil. And what is absolutely essential is to know that, because this is a geological, actually, it is like a geological laboratory, yeah? It's like a geolab, and we can show it to the people, in their own environment where they live. And this is also one of the objectives of geoparks, which will also have a clear consequence on the thinking. And I'm not even mentioning about the cultural, traditional, and other historical objectives. We know that we like to show other people artifacts from the past, and let's talk about paleoclimate or whatever. And then, of course, enjoyment. Enjoyment is also very important, because I think that it is something that is fascinating, that is absolutely impressive, and that is also the why you actually probably do what you do, because it is fascinating for you as well. So the bond between the geopark and the living life is something that can be very useful, and it can make us enjoy our work.
A já teda nevím, jak to tady je. Já jsem bohužel tak...
I am also the member of the team of the Czech presidency of the Council of the European Union. So I have a really, really intense agenda. So I don't know how we do it, but if you had any questions now, I could maybe answer them now, because I will have to leave straight after this. I will speak Russian. There's a very special thing that you mentioned. You said that the soil actually generates much more carbon dioxide, or that much more carbon dioxide is being generated, and that all of this carbon dioxide cannot be absorbed by the soil. And then we need to produce actually more food, and that's why we produce more CO2. So what can we do? What we need to do is to make sure that this organic matter gets back into the soil. It is a big surprise. I mean, for me, it was really shocking. You can't find anywhere in the world the data, of different types of soils with different subsoil. You can't find anywhere the information about how much subsoil matter or organic matter must get back to the soil in order to make sure that it works. But one thing that we know is that we know what is really bad and what is really good. So the proportion between organic and mineral must be appropriate. This is like the main precondition. And the second precondition is that we have to make sure that the organism which had been actually decimated, eliminated, we have to create living conditions which will make them come back. I'm talking about fungi, different bacteria, and other arthropods, mites. And if you have 2 kilometers per 2 kilometers surfaces, then actually the organisms have no time to get back to this field. And if we are there and use the soil intensively and kill the organisms on regular basis, then we have to make sure that the landscape structures actually at least offer refugee places where these organisms can get back. So organic matter and the structure of the landscape.
Okay. Hi. First of all, thank you, Mr. Miko. Thank you for the presentation. Thank you for explaining the importance of the soil with the easiest way, with the graphics and everything. My question is about, so from yesterday, we already talked about the geoparks, and somehow most of us were aware about the importance of the national parks, all protected areas. But also you mentioned and talked to us about the intensive farming, which agriculture, which has a very bad benefits for the environment, for the soil and land. It's good that you said that, okay, there are links between the geoparks and soil. Of course, it preserves the soil, some like certain areas. But in order, when we compare these protected areas with the unprotected areas, it's still very few percentage of the earth.
I know.
Yeah. My question is there theories or methodologies that there must be need to implemented by the farming food industry in order to harm the land and soil less? because I believe that we can't just protect, we can't just give a status to the all lands in the
Jasně.
countries. Yeah, we can't protect the all.
Rozumím otázce. Realita
Thank
je
you.
taková, že ta opatření
I understand the question. The reality is that the measures must be taken really within regular areas and not in the national parks or geoparks only. I understand the geoparks and natural parks as a place where we can do the research to find out what has to be done on the large scale. And it also applies to the forests as well, not only to the regular farming. For you as geologists, it's also important to say how important the subsoil is. So, for example, if you just exploit the nutrients, then it looks completely different. For example, on carbonated rocks, than, for example, on some different types of rocks, because the conversion is really very different. So in some subsoils, the human activity leaves fewer traces than in others. But I think that our parks can be used as a place for studies and research so that the findings are then applied in farming and in forest keeping. So when you ask me about the legislation, then worldwide there are no real measures. Within the Green Deal, Europe is now preparing a directive on the protection of the soil. And this draft should be presented in April 2023, and it will then be debated in the European Parliament. This is the first effort to adopt some new legislation measures. I probably have to finish. In any case, the organizers also have my email address and my contact details. So if there are any questions that we are not able to answer now, then do not hesitate to email me and I will answer. I can communicate in a Russian, French, English, and a bit. I am also able to communicate in German and a bit in Spanish, just a bit. So thank you for your presentation and for taking the questions. So the next person on the agenda is Mr. Josef Zelenka, who is going to present for Geon. Hello, I'm very honored to present a project implemented by a large international team. The following four lectures will introduce the individual geoparks and will also say how they are engaged in this project. Let us now start by saying that I can, just like Mr. Mikko, say that UNESCO first supported the science, the natural sciences, and now it also supports the human sciences and also the soft approach and multidisciplinary approach. And it also just creates a space for the education, and it gives us enough room for the creation of geoparks. Our project has the following mission. I can follow up on the yesterday's lectures when we talked about the focus on the education of younger generations. Yesterday it was said here that the younger the generation, the easier it learns and the easier it is to deal with. And the younger generation can also develop a good relationship to the place they live. So our mission is mainly targeted at the young generation. We have here colleagues from Latin America, from the Geopark Rio Coco, and also from the Geopark Colca and Anagua. And we have here colleagues from Tanzania, from Ngorongoro, and from the Philippines, from the Geopark Bohol Island. And we also have here a representative who is in fact the host of today's conference, and that is the Barandian Geopark. The idea behind this project is to draw from the knowledge of the geologists, and we will try to transfer our knowledge to our colleagues who may have less material support, and these colleagues are open to new knowledge, and the colleagues have, for example, some other experience that we are missing. So, for example, my colleague Marcias from Nicaragua has really an excellent relationship to the soil because the people in Nicaragua have a better link, a better affection for the soil and for the mother nature. This is what we should adopt here in our country, because I think that the presentation by Associate Professor Miko showed that the Western civilization has too much exploited the natural resources, and this is really a good food. This is good food for thought. I'll now return to my vision. We want to address the younger generation and the people living on the area of the geoparks and the visitors to our geoparks by trying to try and use various tools and approaches. I will give you more information on that later on. As I said before, we associate three global geoparks. One of the geoparks is here on the candidate list, but yesterday it was said here that it is really on a good way to become a global geopark, and one of the geoparks is national, and it's also aspiring to become a UNESCO geopark. We associate 6 countries and 4 continents and 3 research institutes, one of them being the Institute of Geology of the Czech Academy of Sciences, then also the University of Hradec Králové, where I am from, and the Open IT company. It is a private business, an IT company, because we really communicate long distances, and we had a large number of online meetings. We will use a web and geo portal. This is an IT company that will provide for the technical equipment. I'm now moving on to the 4 main tools. Oh, sorry, I just clicked wrong. A couple of words about the motivation. We invited the representatives of the geoparks, and next year or in the upcoming years we would like to invite the so-called ambassadors. It will be representatives of the younger generation who will be involved in the geo-education, and they will be engaged in contests, and also they will be involved in the international mobility. Let us now move on to the tools. The geo content is now really on purpose in the middle. The rest are other tools. Yesterday, and the ABC approach was mentioned here, that we should interconnect the abiotic, cultural, and socio-economic elements in the geoparks in the geo-education. Along with the colleague Martina Paskova, we are trying to develop this idea further on. And I think it was said here several times yesterday that the geo-education must be multidisciplinary. The content will contain a lot of different types of information. For example, you had the chance to visit a museum where we had the information about the dinosaurs from the primeval times. And we will also, it's also good to present stories. Yesterday, for example, we presented the story of a Permonicus, a knocker, or for example, a mining creature. So we will simply create some stories that we will transfer in the geo-education. Geo courses will be used. we are now preparing the first geo-portal for the Barandian National Geopark. We'll first evaluate it, and then we shall see. Many geo courses will then be organized as a contest, as a playful, as a game. A part will be for the public, and a part of the portal will be intended for the management and for sharing the experience and information with our partners. Besides this, we are planning various types of expositions and contests. We also have here representatives of an island country, so that is why I assume that we might, for example, use these physical transfer of exhibits, or for example, geo trails will be promoted within this project. I should also say that this project is open. Yesterday we wanted to establish contact with colleagues who inspired us with their approach to the protection of the environment. And they also inspired us with the way they work with the local communities. And the results of our work will be freely available. So, for example, we published a press release, and the press release and scientific findings will be available to all of you. Now I will give you an overview of activities. For example, we held some online meetings via the Microsoft Teams platform. We also had some workshops with our partners, and in fact this event is also on the list of our activities, because it is an exchange of experience. The meetings are scheduled at least twice a year, so the UNESCO funds will be used for funding the trips from our place to your place, or the other way around. If it's possible, we will travel to your countries so that we can visit the specific partner. Public relations are important, like the publication of press release, or for example fundraising, because the money that we raise now is only possible, can only be used really for the initial phase. We also created a logo of the project. You have seen it before. This is the first version of the Geo portal where our partners are presented. So this is in fact a interface from where you can click on what you like to see. So here you can see what the project, what the web should look like. The publicly accessible part will address the public. We will present here our PR activities, and we will also present the findings of our partners and of our team. We also assume that we will publish here a larger presentation about our partner parks, and will also incorporate an e-learning platform for the geo courses and for the geo-education. And the non-public part, as I said, will be used for the management. There will be a discussion forum. We will incorporate here information for the development of our approaches.
As an inspiration, we have already agreed on that we will include it on the Geo portal. These are different films produced by the Czech Geological Society, and part of them will be used, will be also translated. We will create subtitles for the films. So this is just an example of the activities that we have planned for the future. So this is the meeting, the joint meeting. This is one of the press releases. This picture, this photograph is Kolka Geopark, a wonderful, wonderful mountain from a sandstone. And below there is an exhibition of dinosaurs. So it has been a really, really nice experience with our colleagues. This is one of the online meetings that we've held together because obviously we are so far away from each other that we sometimes have to use this form. Our colleague from Nigeria, a colleague who has been helping us to do this project. What I wanted to show is that it is not only a joint cooperation of different institutions, but also of different experts. This is a colleague of ours who writes a scientific article. So this is going to be one of the outputs of this project. So that's it, actually.
Dotazy?
Any questions? Okay, thank you very much for the presentation. And now we will ask our colleagues, and I will give the floor to Mr. Abraham Cáceres Cabana. Okay, sorry. Jak teď chcete dělat? Okay, sorry.
A vy budete překládat jako, že on řekne jako...
Přesně tak, přesně tak. On už ví. Entonces usted habla y yo.
Buenos días. Desde ya agradecido por la organización del país anfitrión que vendría a ser República Checa.
Dobrý den, dobrý.
Hello to all of you. First and foremost, I would like to thank the organizers of this host country for the well reception.
Del Geoparque, Colca y Volcanes de Andagua de Perú.
A jako zástupce naší
And as a representative of our steering committee of the Colca Geopark, I came here to give you some information.
Les voy a presentar brevemente nuestro geoparque en el Perú.
stručně vám chci
Very briefly, I would like to give you some information about our Peru Geopark.
Más o menos leer, por lo menos.
prezentaci je v angličtině.
The presentation is in English, so that those of you who can follow it in English. We are in the Argipa region, and the Geopark has two major parts. It is two geographical regions called Castilla and Cayoma. We talk here about an area covering 19 districts, and the total area is 6,010 square kilometers. On this area we can find 119 geosites, which are also important for our geotourism. When it comes to geotourism, the most attractive location is Kolka. In 2020, a management board was initiated, and this committee shall oversee the administration of the park. And the members of this management committee come from various organizations, both public and private. As I told you, the whole area is divided into two geographical regions. I talked about the 119 geosites, but two of them are really most extraordinary. The first being the Colca Canyon. It is really one of the deepest worldwide. And the second most exceptional location is really the volcanic area, where you can find very tiny volcanoes like dwarfs. They are not so much visited by the tourists. At this moment, we are really trying to develop a sustainable plan for making this accessible to tourists. Here, this image shows just a section of this geographical area. The first picture on your left is in fact twins. It is two volcanoes which are extremely similar, and in the Quechua language spoken by the local people, they are called Yanamaurus, Shipa, and the Johnson. It is those who discovered this in 1932. And on your right-hand side, you can see the waterfalls which are glaciated. It is a very interesting geosite also from the mystical perspective, because the mystical perspective is really very interesting, and interesting for the whole of Peru, for the whole country. So the spirituality is also very important here. It also expresses the importance of the mother tongue. These two images show two lagoons. The first one is called Chachas. This lagoon fulfills various functions for the population. Depending on the season, the water level rises or decreases. It is in fact an astronomical clock. And in the surroundings, we also cultivate various crops used in the farming industry, and there is really a very high level of biodiversity in the flora.
Porque justamente esta laguna de acá recorre 32 kilómetros bajo tierra en las aguas subterráneas y aparece en este manantial más según en otros, digamos, ríos subterráneos. Y pues aparece a 32 kilómetros de este lugar, todo es árido, volcanes, en este caso erupciones volcánicas. Y bueno, es considerado una de las joyas también el Valle de los Volcanes, y tenemos flora, tenemos fauna en este hermoso lugar.
A tady vlastně
And just imagine 32 kilometers away from the first lagoon, there is an underground stream flowing to this beautiful place. It is really a gem in the countryside. It is a lake with beautiful volcanoes all around. It is really a gem, a natural gem.
Está también casi dentro del territorio de Geoparks, que todos los días andamos con Marola. Y bueno, pues es uno de los problemas más activos que tenemos cerca del Geoparks, ¿no? Y obviamente que es algo peligroso la elaboración, pero que según los geólogos no hay peligro, siempre estarán así con la.
On the left-hand side, you can see one active stratovolcano, which is almost on the area of the geopark, but not absolutely. The geologists believe that it is not dangerous to man. The smoke you can see here is there permanently, and it is one of many volcanoes, but probably the most active one.
Con microclimas, también bastante extendido de diferentes tubérculos, y es el lugar más visitado en la tinta del siglo XX.
The Colca Canyon is on your right-hand side. It is a panoramic picture showing the flora, the richness of our flora, and it is probably one of the most visited place by tourists in the whole of the geopark. And at the same time, many plants are cultivated here for the farming.
Aquí podemos apreciar dos plantas importantes de los dos áreas geográficas.
Of course, when we talk about Peru, we have a lot of traditions. It is traditions which are inherent to our life. These pictures show two different types of dancing. It shows the uniforms that we wear, the costumes, which are part of our culture.
Que representa el camino, el traslado, el intercambio comercial que se hace en este caso en América, en la parte andina, ¿no? Usando las llamas como carga. Entonces, es la representación de esta actividad en una danza.
The first dance is called Gamaritos. It is an embodiment of the trade in the Andes mountains.
Se llama Winiki, es una danza de amor, de cortejo, que donde el hombre se viste de mujer para probar, en este caso, digamos, al Geoparks.
There is the first dance is part of the cultural heritage of Peru, and the second dance is also considered as a UNESCO heritage. It is the Vititi dance, symbolizing the love, or for example, trying to appeal to a man or woman. So when you want to be very attractive, you also put on this beautiful dress.
Los dos espacios que me habían gustado, uno que debería ser en este caso Valle de los Volcanes, que aún no es visitado por los turistas, mientras que el otro lado tendría que ser, por ejemplo, el mirador del Cóndor, en Puebla, ahí a las 12 de la mañana los cóndores aparecen volando, y pues que los turistas no les encanta ver, y bueno, es uno de los destinos que antes de la pandemia tenía más o menos 220.000 visitantes al año.
And here you see those two areas I mentioned and that we would like to use for geotourism. Mainly on your left hand side you can see the volcanic volcanic area, which is not that heavily visited by pure tourists, and on the right hand side you can see a canyon which was visited by 220,000 visitors a year before the COVID pandemic. People come here mostly in the morning to observe the flying condors. At this moment, there is an autonomous area called Kolkat, which is responsible for the administration of our geopark. We are now about to prepare some activities, this being one of them, trying to attract the tourists again so that we return to the pre-pandemic numbers. Now, when we want to talk about the education, we may say that we perform various types of activities. On your left-hand side, you can see how the people just swear to become the geopark rangers or protectors. It is people who committed to protecting the geopark. So here you can see the ceremony of swearing, and on the right hand side you can see the children we invite to the geopark, and within our education activities it is just one of many activities. But I would like to repeat that we are still at the start and we want to perform many more activities. As I said before, the Kolka Autonomous Area is the administrative center which manages the geopark and is also trying to really increase the interest among the population. Here you can see a contest which was aiming at children, trying to encourage them to draw a mascot which would become a symbol of this geopark. And on the right hand side you can see an online workshop that we use to spread the education among the people. You know how the COVID, political changes and elections make us adapt to new conditions. And I've now prepared a video and I hope it will play.
Es menos, creo que un minuto. No tiene audio.
¿Tiene sonido o no?
No, simplemente era.
Jenom obraz. Jenom obraz.
Tenía sonido, pero no era explicación.
No, původně asi to zvuk mělo, ale...
¿Qué fue? Oh, el último. No. Bueno, como punto de reflexión, yo creo que podría ser el geoparque. Es importantísimo para todos nosotros que estamos aquí y creo que el geoparque es lo que nos une a todos, ¿no? De los diferentes continentes. Nosotros lo llamamos Pachamama, Madre Tierra, y creo que para nosotros también es algo presente y algo vivo que está ahí. Entonces, por ello, siempre de alguna otra forma nosotros tratamos de protegerlo, pero también creo que siempre falta algo más. Y eventos como este definitivamente es para aprender, ¿no? De las diferentes experiencias y tratar de innovar y darle siempre un sentido. Porque lo lindo creo que nosotros como seres humanos es que aprendemos a diario. Podemos tener diferentes visiones, miradas del geoparque, seguramente de las diferentes profesiones, pero el objetivo creo que en sí es, como yo le puedo llamar, cuidar esta madre tierra o la casa grande que tenemos, no que es solo una, que no hay dos, que no hay tres. Entonces, gracias por el espacio, gracias por haberme escuchado. En quechua, gracias sería añay, en este caso, ¿no? Lo que hablamos quechua. Eso sería, y muchas gracias.
I think that toward the end, we should also think about the reason why we all met here. All of us want to protect what is common to us. We want to protect the love for the geoparks, for the mother nature, Pachamama. Despite the fact that we have the love in common, I believe that much more can be done, and I think like these events like today's venue. The most beautiful about today's event is the fact that despite the fact that we might have a bit different idea about how to work and protect the geoparks, we may have different ideas, but there is only one Mother Nature. We have only one house, not two, not three. There is only one mother tongue. Thank you for your attention.
Vydržíte ještě?
Gracias por su presentación. Děkujeme za prezentaci.
Thank you for your presentation. And do we have any questions?
Beautiful presentation. I would like to ask the altitude of the volcanic cones. Is it possible to climb for tourists or they need some acclimatization to?
Sí, pueden subir los turistas en los volcanes, porque tenemos volcanes desde 30 metros hasta 300 metros. Es decir, que todos los volcanes extintos o los volcanes enanos pueden subirse. Por ejemplo, una muestra de esto.
Yes, the volcano is from 30 to 300 meters, so when tourists come and want to climb, they can do so. For example, these two volcanoes can be climbed as simply you can walk onto these. But we are now at an altitude of about 3,600 meters above sea, so you must add the 300 meters on top of that.
Needed. If tourists are coming from lower areas, they need to stay some days and to start climbing.
Sí, justamente el centro El soporte que nosotros tenemos en la ciudad de Arequipa está a 2.300 metros sobre el nivel del mar. Y luego, por ejemplo, para Colca está sobre los 3.200 metros sobre el nivel del mar. Entonces, el turista llega a Arequipa, en Arequipa se climatiza, conoce otros atractivos turísticos, recursos que tenemos y luego recién puede ir a Colca o puede ir al Valle de los Volcanes. Así, ¿no?
Ano, samozřejmě myslíme na to.
Yes, of course, we think about this because the information tourist center is in the city of Arequipa at an altitude of 2,300 meters. So the tourists first come here, they visit some other monuments, stay for some time, and then they can go to the Kolka, to the volcanic area, where we have an altitude of about 3,000 meters above sea level.
Já bych se pokusil odpovědět
So I will now answer from the perspective of a tourist. The acclimatization is important when you come for the first time. It's necessary when you come the second or third time, you will probably manage it. So during the first visit, you must be very, very careful, and you must climb very, very slowly. And when it's really about 3,000 meters, you must be careful. For example, during our second visit, we did not have any problems anymore, but it can be very individual.
Thank you for the presentation. So my question is about what kind of problems did you face when in the I don't know, in the in the establishment of the Geopark in your country? Because somehow yesterday we heard from some countries that what kind of problems they're facing. I think we didn't see any in your presentation. I'm really curious.
En fin, en el proceso
Yes.
del geoparque, ahí nos hemos enfrentado a problemas, por ejemplo, uno, el tema de las instituciones. Institución pública, institución privada, por otro lado, que no se ponían de acuerdo en una mirada unificada del tema del geoparque. Eso, digamos, fuera del geoparque, fuera del territorio. Dentro del territorio, un problema por ahí también surgió con las comunidades campesinas, ¿no? A quienes se tenía que explicar el tema del geoparque, qué consiste. Porque suele ocurrir de que uno puede pensar geoparque, mi propiedad privada ya no va a ser mío, o algo así como que la UNESCO lo va a proteger, como que yo no puedo construir de una manera distinta o que yo no puedo, digamos, labrar o sembrar la tierra que tengo. Entonces, ese ha sido un trabajo de sensibilización que tuvimos que hacer y ahora, pues, actualmente se entiende que es un geoparque en el territorio. Las instituciones, tanto públicas como privadas, también tienen ya una visión, una noción, digamos, del geoparque. Porque es algo normal, porque para nosotros geoparque era algo nuevo, algo que nosotros no sabíamos. Entonces es un proceso también en la población, en el mundo académico, en las instituciones, en todos los que de alguna otra forma estamos comprometidos con el geoparque.
Yes, of course, we had to cope with a large number of problems. We can split them into two groups. One being of external nature, having nothing to do with the geopark itself, and then of internal nature. The external problems were like problems with the institutions, either public or private. Both these types of institutions were not able to agree on how to establish the geoparks. And on the area of the geopark itself, we had problems with the farmers because they had the feeling that they will no longer be able to farm there because it would be considered as a UNESCO heritage that would no longer be their soil. That is why we needed to educate the people and inform them that this was not relevant. Right now, the institutions have a unified view of the geoparks, but I think it is quite normal because it is something new. It means that neither institutions nor the people knew what was going to happen here, but at this moment the situation is stabilized.
Я тоже вас благодарю за очень интересную презентацию. И как
So I would like to thank you for your interesting presentation concerning the establishment of this geopark, and I would like to know how you are protecting these geoparks. So when you are saying that you are protecting the geoparks, what do you mean exactly? How are you doing that?
Digamos de los 6.010 kilómetros cuadrados que es el geoparque. Dentro del geoparque también tenemos una reserva que se llama Salinas y Aguada Blanca. Entonces la reserva ya está protegida, ya en el tema de guardabosque se podría decir, pero a la misma vez Autoridad Autónoma de Colca, este ente gestor de Colca que administra el tema de turismo, que ve el tema de turismo, también tiene personal, en este caso, en el territorio, digamos, viendo los geositios, cuidando los espacios que son declarados del geoparque. Pero por otro lado, aún faltaría implementar quizás un poquito más allá con el tema de alguna ley o ordenanza, digamos, regional. Entonces, estamos también en ese proceso, digamos, de la protección, que todavía no ha acabado. Por una parte, el área está protegida, sí, pero faltaría quizás la protección en la otra área, que es el Valle de los Volcanes. Pues una sí, pero la otra todavía faltaría.
Ano, ptáte se na
Yes, you're asking about the protection. It's very difficult to protect an area of 6,010 square kilometers because we also have a special natural reserved area here, which is better protected. It also has its own rangers who take care of the area. I also said that we have an autonomous area which administers this park. It is its own staff overseeing the individual geosites, but I think that we need more protection, especially of legislative nature. So we would really need some legislation that would help us, at least some regulations at regional level that would make sure that a higher level of protection is guaranteed. So you can say that some parts are better protected, but when it comes to the volcano canyon, a legislative protection is still missing here. Last question, please, and then you can, for example, ask questions during the break or during the lunch.
Sorry about that, and sorry about that. Maybe the lady want to ask. My question is about how the community involved to the protection of the geopark, and especially how community can be benefited from the geopark, especially on the tourism side. So, are there any possibility ways that community earn any profit from the geoparks, and what are the ways? So that's it. Thank you.
Es una linda pregunta.
Nice question.
El tema de la protección, o sea, por ejemplo, de parte de la comunidad autóctona, está a través de las comunidades campesinas. Están creadas, entonces ellos como comunidad campesina velan el territorio, todo el espacio, casi todo el espacio del geoparque tiene diferentes comunidades. Cada distrito de los 19 distritos que conforma el geoparque, cada distrito tiene su comunidad campesina. Entonces, de esa forma protegen, digamos, todo el territorio. Ahora, el beneficio, ¿cómo es que se benefician con el turismo? De alguna otra forma es que la Autoridad Autónoma de Colca cobra un boletaje para ingreso a Colca. Ese boletaje es repartido a los 19 distritos de la jurisdicción cada año un determinado cantidad de dinero. Esta le puede administrar a los distritos o también en este caso las comunidades puedan tener un acceso para de alguna otra forma, digamos, hacer alguna actividad y que ellos puedan darle uso, por un lado. Por otro lado, también tenemos el tema del turismo comunitario, ese segmento. Entonces, hay comunidades interesados en el tema de turismo comunitario, entonces a través de ello es que tienen sus negocios, alojamientos, restaurante, cabalgata, orientadores, podrían ser en este caso locales. Entonces, eso es más o menos como se viene trabajando en el tema de turismo.
Tak, co se týče ochrany.
So when it comes to protection, we said that the whole area is split in 19 districts, and in each district there are communities of farmers. Communities of farmers who cultivate the soil and also protect their own district. So this is how they are engaged in the protection of the area. And when it comes to the benefits or to the profit, we may say that the autonomous region also collects some fees for visiting the geopark, and these fees, the collected money, is then distributed among the 19 districts after a specific period of time, and the districts then administer the money on their own. Either they pay the money out to the community, and the community decides on its own how it's want to use it, or the district invests it in its own projects. And the community tourism also generates various opportunities. So some communities, for example, offer hotels, or for example guides, or restaurants, or for example horse riding, and this is how they can also benefit financially. Once again, I wanted to thank you for having me here. I also am happy that our project will get new dynamics. I would like to thank you for your time and for your attention, and I promise I will learn English.
Tak, paráda, my děkujeme.
Great, we would like to thank you for your presentation, and now we will ask Joshua Moshi Mankunda to present the Ngorongoro Geopark.
Okay. So, this way.
Yep. All right. Thank you. Yeah. Good morning, everybody. My name's Joshua Mankunda. I am the director for the Ngorongoro Rengai UNESCO Global Geopark. And on behalf of my colleagues, Rightness and Ramadhani, I'll be presenting about our geopark. Our presentation is divided in two parts. The first part will introduce to the geoparking itself, including where we are, what are we preserving, and what are we doing actually in our geopark. And the second part will show you, actually introduce you to the diverse heritage that we are preserving for humanity at Ngorongoro Global Geopark in Tanzania. So here is where are we. We are actually located in Africa, East Africa. The size of our geopark is close to 12,000 square kilometers, which I believe is
should be much bigger than Czechia Republic, right? No? Okay, the protected area, the total protected area of Tanzania is actually 39%, close to 365,000 square kilometers. This is bigger than Czechia. This is the protected area for the whole country. We have 3 ethnic tribes in our geopark, and we were nominated in 2018 at the first UNESCO Global Geopark south of Sahara. There are only 2 UNESCO Global Geopark in Africa, Mugun in Morocco, and ours is second, but it is the first in south of Sahara. This is our geological setting. Basically, we are situated within the Great East African Rift Valley, dated close to 2 million years ago. We have diverse earth heritage. We have geology, we have wildlife. In the video, we'll have an opportunity to see the expansion of the heritage that we have. We are clad of mankind. We also have culture and people. In terms of geology, this is prehistory, this is paleontology and paleoanthropology. We host the only evidence in the world which shows when human beings started to walk. All of us, when did we start to walk by 2 legs? That was past 3.6 million years ago. There are footprints of these ancestors in our geopark. We do education, science, and research. We are very important in the world in terms of ecology. We are UNESCO Mixed World Heritage Site. We are UNESCO Marine Biosphere, and now we are UNESCO Global Geopark. So we host very important site in terms of science, in terms of education and research, especially in understanding human evolution, both biologically and culturally. We have some activities regarding to local communities, geoheritage, geotourism, entrepreneurship. We also have some sessions to geohazards, well, geo-education to the communities and how to sustain their lives through tourism-related activities in our geopark. This is very brief regarding the geopark, what we have and what we are doing, but this is quite an important area in Tanzania. As I've said, about 38% of the country is protected. Tourism in our country contributes about 12% in terms of country's GDP. It also contributes to 6% of employment, and these 2 areas are growing at an average of 5% each year. So it's very important in sustaining communities and people's livelihood in our country. What we have realized in terms of geopark during construction and how we managed to become geopark is through partnership. Probably this is the reason why UNESCO Global Geopark is a fast growing network than all other UNESCO's destinations. So it's through this spirit of partnership and collaboration like what you are witnessing in this conference in our project, the 4Geon project, which involves 4 continents from the previous presentation. So I'll just take you through short video regarding what we have in our geopark. Think the technology. Yep.
Is it supposed to have sound? No, it's just here.
We have, I would say, biggest craters which are unbroken caldera. One is the Ngorongoro crater, which hosts more than 22,000 species of wildlife. We do have the Empakai crater, which is filled of water. We have the canyon, which is the important habitat for some important birds. We have all the wildlife that you know in their nature, not in zoos. So this is very brief concerning what we are preserving at Ngorongoro. You may visit us at the website and the Twitter and the account that you have just shown from the last slide of my presentation. So thank you so much.
I will leave this video to finish. Okay. Takže my moc
Thank you very much for your presentation. Are there any questions?
Sorry, how many visitors, tourists do you have per year?
Before COVID, it was close to 700,000 visitors.
Okay.
Your geopark is really very beautiful and interesting. We will visit if we have a chance. But I just want to make a comment just for your information that from one of our caves was found the shoes and it was aged 5,000 years old with different methods. It was proved that it is 5,000 years old. So if you go in Google or somewhere, you will find more information about the first leather shoes, which was found in Armenia. Thank you.
Thank you very much. This complements very well to the humanity.
Nějaké další dotazy? Some other questions?
Any other questions? Thank you very much for your presentation.
Takže teď bych...
Thank you very much. I would suggest we make a break because we're going to go to the geo schools and we would like to tell you who's going to leave when with which bus. So give us a few seconds.
Takže v prvním autobusu...
So in the first bus, Jacob, Mateusian, Elvin,
Umbátová, Elmír Gadirov, Jejhun Pašajev, George Kapridanšvili, Karl Amurgalašvili, Rezo Getiašvili, Tamar Šičinadze, Natália Guranda, Ala Donika, Daria Ivanita, Štěpán Rak, Alena Dering a Petra Tachecí.
So this was the first bus. And this bus leaves now. in 4 minutes. In 4 minutes by the entrance. The second bus.
Marcio Rivas Núñez, Milagros, Abraham Carreras Cabana, Karel Michal Din, Jovenika Kanup, Joshua Makunda, Rami Lightness, Yuri Zinko, Roma Natiuk, Arsen, Nikoyan, Narin Hakobian, Arus, Nersayan, Sonia, Kalantarian a Vasil Melnik.
Domluvíme se, že 10, 15, 11, 15 dole.
A druhý.
And the second bus leaves 11:15, 11:15.
První jedou s tebou.
Yeah, first was me and second bus was Luboš. No? Okay, so second bus was
Junior.
Junior Luboš.